Hello and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and joining me here in the Murrieta studios is Dr. David Burns. Hi, David.
Hi, Fabrice.
Dr. David Burns has been a pioneer in the development of cognitive therapy, and he is the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 20 languages. He is an emeritus adjunct clinical professor of psychiatry at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Welcome to episode 98 of the Feeling Good podcast. This is the moment that everyone has been eagerly awaiting. This is going to be the step 5 of Lee's relationship journal. David and Jill, so you're coaching Lee through using the 5 secrets of effective communication. We've talked about this a number of times in the podcast, I think going all the way back to episode 14. But this is the first time that it's done with a live patient. I was quite happy about this. Now, in this segment, Lee makes a few errors in using the 5 secrets. And like most people, there's always like one of the 5 secrets that he systematically misses. Which one was it?
It was the I feel statement. I mean, he made some errors, but that seemed to be the one that was the most challenging for him.
Yeah. And even after you pointed that out to him and he gave it another try, it still was kind of lacking. And why is that?
I think he shared with us actually that his own analysis of why it was so hard for him is that it really made him feel very vulnerable, and it represented such a different shift from how he thought a man should communicate. And so I think he was kind of bumping up against his own sort of ego and anxiety about being vulnerable and sharing his feelings.
Yeah, that was really ingrained, and sometimes this is really a tough obstacle to overcome. What can push somebody to actually be willingly letting one's ego die? How do we get there?
Well, that is the most important question in the world today and has been for 2,500 years, and Jill will now reveal the answer.
Hardly. I don't know. That's right. It's so many people are so unwilling to share their feelings, right? It's so much easier to hurl an attack back or to defend oneself, right? You so rarely see people, responding to criticism by sharing their feelings. I think in this case, as we practiced with Lee, we modeled for him, right, ways of saying it. And I think when he heard David and I using I feel statements, it kind of dawned on him that sounded really lovely or warm or caring. I mean, I think he had the sense that, wow, what I'm doing is not working and I need to try something different. And I think in hearing us model it, he had the hope and the sense that this, would sound much better to his wife. And also he shared with us that he wanted to stop having this sort of masculine, obnoxious response to his wife and wanted to try to be more warm and connected, to be a different kind of man, is what he said.
Yeah. And one thing that Lee reflected upon after the session was that a lot of that he actually knew because he's been studying the model for a while, but he made a very important point that knowing it is one thing, but going through the process is where the transformation happens.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of the things that were salient in his attempt at changing his way of communicating. One thing was in what he thought was part of the inquiry, he attempted to do some problem solving about what issues they were having. David, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, great question. By the way, I'll be posting the 5 secrets of effective communication that we're referring to on the show notes. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or some other outlet, if you go to www.feelinggood.com, then you can sign up to receive the podcast directly from my website, and then you'll have access to the show notes, which are generally very, very helpful if you want to take a deeper look. But there are 5 secrets of effective communication, and one of the listening skills is inquiry. That's where you're asking for more information about how the other person is thinking and feeling. And there's common mistakes that people make with each of the 5 secrets of effective communication. And one of the common ones in inquiry is called problem solving, like how can we solve this problem? How can I do better? Type of thing. Or if a therapist attacks a patient, criticizes, if a patient criticizes a therapist and says, you're not helping, you don't understand me, the therapist will often say, well, tell me how I could do better. And that's an error because the patient doesn't know how you can do better. You ask your colleagues for consultation, but what the question the patient wants to hear is, tell me more about how you're feeling. I can imagine you're angry. I can imagine you're feeling hurt, feeling discouraged. That's important. I want to hear all about your feelings. That's a good inquiry. But when you say, oh, let's solve this problem, you're running away from your emotions, and that's Lee's very, very problem. And we say it's a male problem, but women too have trouble being vulnerable and sharing feelings. So when he starts solving problems, he's running away from his feelings. To say, I'm feeling sad right now. I'm feeling.
And from her feelings too.
Pardon me?
And from her feelings.
Yes. Oh, yes. Running away from her feelings. Although he's less threatened by learning feeling empathy and acknowledging her feelings and asking about them. But yes, when he says, let's solve this problem, he's running away from her feelings as well as his own. And, probably some of this is probably genetic, but a lot of it is cultural and, society's roles. And when I was little, I have trouble crying too. And when I cry, it's just I feel so grateful. But when I was little, I was raised in Denver, and it was all this right-wing stuff. And my parents had me join this Highlander Boys when I was 7 years old, and it was a paramilitary organization. And after school, we had to go downtown Denver and drill with guns and stuff. It was like being in the Army. And then at the summer camp, you're 8 years old, and you have to even drill in the middle of the night, and you're on guard duty, and you're walking through the forest. It's just all we did was military stuff. And if we smiled, we had to pound our hands on the ground for 30 minutes.
Wow, I didn't know you did that.
Yeah, it was. But we at the time we thought, oh, this is a wonderful thing to be doing. And then one night I was on guard duty at the infirmary. I had to sit there, where you went, where you were sick, and I was sitting there, and they forgot to change the guard. And I'd been sitting there about 5 hours, and it was getting dark and cold, and 2 men were walking by, who were the older men there at the summer camp. And I started crying, I guess, so they'd see, you cry because you want some compassion and help. And then they heard me crying, and they took me into the cafeteria, which was way away from where people were sleeping, and they said that we should whip him. And they said, you're a man, and a man doesn't cry.
Wow.
And then they said, oh, well, we'll let you off this time, but if you cry again, we're going to whip you.
Wow.
And that's so typical. And they probably didn't think they were being cruel. They probably believed that they were helping me become a man, giving me some helpful thing. But I think we have these messages, in our culture, and you see it, at the government level, in international conflicts, it's always about, let's kick ass, let's show them that they can't push us around. And that's why empathy and sharing of feelings, it's kind of missing from the world. I apologize for my stupid political comment there, but it's very, very difficult for people to achieve intimacy. We're so trained to do things that keep us lonely and keep others at a distance.
Yeah, and and your response to Lee, about the problem solving. I made a note, and what you said essentially is like the inquiry is the problem solving.
Yeah. 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 The thing is that the attempt to solve problems is the cause of all marital problems. The refusal to solve problems is always the solution. That's a kind of a paradox.
Right.
But really
that's what you said to him. Yeah. And a few other things that happen are maybe not as crucial, but at some point, I think Lee kind of like went almost like overboard. And Jill, you said to him, don't throw yourself under the bus.
Yeah, there was a way, I think, with he was adding a lot of I'm sorry's, and he was making it seem like he was an awful person. And what I said to him is I think the reality is, you want to be present, you want to be tender, you want to be empathic to the other person. But, if you go so far into the, like, I'm a horrible person, then the other it's kind of off-putting to the person that you're talking to. The other person's going to feel like, now I got to take care of you,
right.
Like it no longer really becomes about them, right? I mean, you want to hear sort of a warm, connected, like, gosh, I you're right. And you did raise my voice, and, it's kind of embarrassing for me to realize that. And it's kind of hard for me to hear. I feel a little bit defensive, but, gosh, I really care about you. I really want to try and figure out, how to do this differently and parent together. And can you tell me more about what this is like? Cause I know I do this a lot, but to sort of keep it on a, like, we're just having this conversation, and I'm connecting and I'm understanding, but not, I'm going to go jump into a hole and I deserve to die or something like that. Because when you throw yourself under the bus like that, it changes the whole vibe. The other person doesn't really feel attended to. It suddenly shifts gears, and then they feel like they got to take care of you, which is not at all the point either. It's almost self-centered to do that.
Yeah.
And almost on a higher level, the fabulous point you just made, Jill, applies to each of the 5 secrets of effective communication. There's common errors that people make with each of them. And listeners to the podcast should not get the idea you can read my list of 5 secrets and then do them skillfully. It takes a lot of practice and feedback to get good at it. Every bit as challenging as learning to play the piano, and you wouldn't think that you could walk up to a piano and start pounding on the keys and have beautiful music come out. Well, the 5 secrets of effective communication are like the 5 keys on a musical instrument, and learning to do them in a way that will bring joy and intimacy and love and connection into your life, whether you're a therapist or a general, citizen type. It takes not only motivation, but then once you're motivated and wanting to learn it, it takes a lot of practice and feedback to develop a high degree of skill.
And also in his response, Lee said several times, I'm sorry, and you commented on that, David.
Yeah, I'm sorry can be done in a functional or a dysfunctional way, but in my experience, 90% of the time when people say I'm sorry, they're doing it in a dysfunctional way. Like if, let's say you're angry with me and you say, oh, David, what you did, blah, 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 is ticking me off. And I say, oh, I'm sorry. It's kind of like saying, shut up, I don't want to deal with your anger, I don't want to deal with your feelings, let's stop talking about this. And on the other hand, you can say, I'm sorry in a functional way, in a loving way, to say, I really owe you an apology right now, and I'm shocked to see how my comment hurt your feelings, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're feeling pretty ticked off at me right now and kind of hurt. And I feel sad too, because I really love you. I really care about you, and yet I just screwed up. Can you tell me more about how you're feeling right now, and maybe tell me more about other times I've been insensitive or said things or did things that hurt your feelings or made you feel put down. And now you've opened the door for them to share what's going on inside. You've shown warmth and the willingness to hear and to really listen.
Yeah, in other words, you're being descriptive about how you are sorry without using the word I'm sorry, which is kind
Yeah.
of formulaic.
Yeah. I mean, you can even include, I'm really sorry for what I did, and I can see how angry you're feeling, and I'm feeling like I'm really sad and kind of ashamed that I was so insensitive. Tell me more about it. I wanna hear, because I really care about you. I mean, that was, I'm sorry, but
Plus.
functional, healthy.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's the way that you use these words, the way that you use these things, and human nature is not terribly good. Our instincts are not really good much of the time, or most of the time, and you really have to have a radical change in your life to use the five secrets. It's not just some gimmicks you can memorize.
I love how positive you are, David. Speaking of positive, there's another negative or a difficult emotion that you reminded Lee was very seldom acknowledged. What is that?
Anger. That people, I always tell therapists, there's when I'm doing training or workshops, there's one emotion that no therapist in the United States or Canada has ever acknowledged and will ever be able to acknowledge. I'm making a real exaggeration of trying to wake people up, but it's anger. And when I'm doing empathy training, and when Jill is doing empathy and communication training, over and over, even when we role play a very, very angry patient, and then the other person has to role play the therapist and respond, that 99% of the time, the therapist will not acknowledge that the patient is angry. And similarly, in the general public, when we're in conflict with a loved one, we will rarely acknowledge that the other person may be feeling angry, and ask them to tell us more about the anger. That people just won't do that. And the problem is that when you have this anger phobia or conflict phobia and won't acknowledge or ask the person to tell you more about their anger, then the anger mushrooms because you still haven't heard it.
Yeah, and often when I'm working with therapists or with patients either, and they're trying to, and we're trying to teach them the 5 secrets, I often want them to acknowledge that the other person might be to be able to say, I can imagine that you might be feeling kind of angry, annoyed, frustrated. But I also encourage them to acknowledge some of the vulnerable feelings in addition. And so, because quite often when someone is angry with you, they're also disappointed, or they're hurt, or they feel lonely. And so that's the challenge as well, is to try to get people to acknowledge someone else's anger and frustration and irritability, which is challenging, but also to be able to use feeling words like, and I can imagine that you feel disappointed in me, or that you feel lonely, or hurt by me, right? Absolutely.
From a practical point of view, and also from a self-promotional narcissistic point of view, if people do like the podcast, and if you want, as a therapist, if you want to get better with the 5 secrets, or if you're a general citizen type and want to think you'd like to incorporate the 5 secrets into your own personal life, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Feeling Good Together. It's a mass market book available on Amazon. You can get it really anywhere. But the neat thing about the book is it will bring the podcast to life in book form, but it's also interactive, where you do written exercises while you're reading. And that's another tool you can be using if you're inspired by what we're saying, and if you'd really like to radically change the way you connect with people, you relate to people, and the way you communicate with people.
It's a wonderful book. It's I love it.
Yeah, I do too. I recommend this to many of my clients. And of course, this is not the first and only book about intimate communication, and which bring me to a language that Lee used that. And it, for a lot of people, sounds like, well, this is a way to express how you feel. And he said this, what you said made me feel, and he expresses the feelings. But that formula, which sometimes gets taught as, when I heard you say this, or when you did this, I felt that. you don't really think that's a good way to express how you feel, David. Can you say why?
Well, let's let Jill do it. I think I'm blabbing too much, but it's incredibly important what you just said.
Well, I'll give it a shot, and then you can offer more commentary if you'd like. Well, I mean, I would say, right. I suppose if you say to someone, when you said this, it made me feel this. To my ears, that still sounds kind of blaming, because it still sounds like you started it, you did this terrible thing, and as a result, you made me feel this way.
And I'm a victim.
And I'm a victim, because it's kind of like you made me feel. Now, again, there are probably ways people can use that language in a warm and non-defensive way, and it may work well. But what we prefer, I would say, is generally, as much as possible, leading with what we call disarming. If the person says, if Lee's wife says, you're raising your voice with our daughter, you don't have to do that, or I don't like it when you do that. It would be so much better to lead with, you're absolutely right. I was raising my voice with her, and there probably are better ways that I could be communicating with her. And then he could say, I have to admit, I feel kind of embarrassed, or, a little uncomfortable, or you kind of caught me off guard. It's hard for me to hear that. I feel uncomfortable. And, I also oftentimes feel frustrated with her daughter. Like, this is sort of sharing your feelings, but it's not when you said this to me, I felt you made me feel this way. I think leading with disarming and really seeing the world through the other person's eyes, empathizing with how the other person, feels, to his wife, you're probably feeling annoyed with me and frustrated with me and disappointed that I keep kind of screwing up like this. And then there's always space and room for you to share your own feelings. But the idea is to be able to kind of like de-escalate, almost picture like the balloon is the anger. We're sort of letting the air out of the balloon. We're seeing the world through the other person's eyes. We're connecting with them. And then we can share our feelings with them as well. We need to share our feelings too. We don't want to be a doormat, but that's not like the number one thought in my mind is I've got to make sure this other person understands how I feel.
Yeah. One thing that I do sometimes, and correct me, David, if you think that's not a good way to go, is I sort of express my own dismay at my own negative reaction, saying, I feel a little bit ticked off, and I don't even like that, and yet I can't help myself.
Oh, I think that's great. And when you're expressing your own feelings of anger, you can also do that in an affectionate, loving way. It's like the Catholic, it was a Jewish theologian, Martin Buber, talked about I-it relationship versus an I-thou relationship. That in an I-it relationship, when you express your anger, you want to hurt the other person, or you want to manipulate the other person, or get back at the other person, or maybe in a passive aggressive way, just kind of treat them coldly and don't even mention your emotions. But in an I-thou relationship, you can share your feelings in an attitude of respect, and you can express intense anger in a very loving way, like I might say to you, and I'm actually not angry with you, Fabrice. I'm incredibly grateful to you, and I like you a great deal. I'm so thrilled that you made these podcasts happen, and you bring so much to the table. But if I was really angry with you, I might say, Fabrice, I'm just so angry with you right now. I want to wring your neck or put a bullet through your head or something like that. I'm just ticked off. At the same time, I just love you to death, and it hurts me when we're in conflict like this. And tell me more about what you're thinking and feeling, because you gave me some criticism just now and I hate to say it, but I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. Tell me more about it. You see, so that would be, I told you extreme anger, but the goal wasn't to hurt you or to put you down.
Exactly. The goal, if the goal is intimacy, then we have to figure out how we can be authentic and connect and listen to the other person and share our feelings. That's so important, but in a way where we're talking about how we're feeling rather than acting on how we're feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the acting out that hurts.
Yeah.
If you express, that's a different thing.
Yeah, you share your feelings rather than lashing out with your feelings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Let's listen to this in action. I think I'm ready for that. Okay?
Sounds good. So specifically, you said, I don't think there was anything wrong with what I did. You can be stern without losing your shit. There are times where she needs to know I'm serious and not messing about anymore. And you acknowledged to us that that was lacking in sharing your feelings. It was lacking in acknowledging her feelings. It was lacking in sort of warmth, what we call stroking, connection, kindness. And so what we would do is have you pull out the 5 Secrets of Effective Communication handout and kind of work right now to really revise what you said. So imagine that she says the same thing, but we're going to try and figure out how can you respond differently so that you don't keep perpetuating this dynamic.
Okay.
Do you have a copy of the 5 Secrets with you, Lee?
I don't, but I could give it a go. I've had some training in it, so I won't be a million miles off the mark.
I'll post it on the show notes. I'm just trying to bring it up on my screen.
You
Can you do screen
me?
sharing?
I actually could do a screen share, David. Do you want me to do that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me just pull it up.
See, David, Jill is a genius in more ways than one.
Yes, that's for sure. 5 Secrets. And for those who are listening on audio, there's again, I'll post it on my website on the show notes. But it's there's 5 communication techniques arranged. EAR, empathy, assertiveness, and respect. And the 3 empathy techniques are the disarming technique. That's where Lee would find truth in what his wife is saying, even if it seems unreasonable to him. And then there's thought and feeling empathy, 2 forms of empathy. With thought empathy, you paraphrase the other person's words. You repeat what the other person is saying to you, so they see you got the message. Feeling empathy, you acknowledge how the other person is feeling, based in this case on what she said, and that won't be too tough because Lee, you have a pretty good idea of all kinds of emotions that you thought she was having, and you even listed them. And the third listening skill, the third empathy skill, is inquiry. And this would be at the end, there's no order that you do these things in, but except that inquiry usually comes at the end. You ask gentle, probing questions to learn more, in this case, about what your wife is thinking and feeling.
Okay.
The A equals assertiveness skill is to share your feelings. It's not like sticking up for yourself or making demands on the other person, but to use I feel statements. And the formula here is, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. And again, you mentioned all kinds of feelings you were having when she criticized you, and you were feeling unhappy and ashamed would be a great one to share, and inadequate and frustrated. And, you said you were feeling foolish and embarrassed, to share your feelings rather than to attack the other person by arguing. And then finally, the stroking is respect. R equals respect, and the technique is stroking. It's to say something caring or loving, even in the heat of a battle. And if you've been watching Jill on the show today or listening, you've heard a lot of very skillful and stroking of you, Lee, and to say warm, kindly things to you and about you, and all of these techniques have to come from their heart. If you're doing them as gimmicks, they won't work. And now I'll turn it back over to Jill, who will guide us and guide you, Lee, in using these techniques.
Oh, well, I guess I would say we could go in either of 2 directions. We could encourage you, Lee, to think through, how might you disarm her? How could you offer her some thought and feeling empathy? We could sort of walk through some of these. Or I think we also could just do some role plays now, David, with Lee, where, we could sort of play the role of Lisa and give Lee a chance to respond kind of using the 5 secrets, and then we'll give you feedback, Lee, and try and keep working on revising kind of your communication until you hit the nail on the head. Maybe what sounds better to you, Lee?
If we do the role play and you could be Liza, but then after we've done the role play, I just have a question that I want to ask about the assertiveness part of this, but I don't want to ask the question before we do the role play. It'll make more sense if I ask it afterwards.
Okay. So does that sound right? David, do you want me to just be Liza? Sorry, I don't know why I called her Lisa. It's Liza?
Everybody calls her Lisa or Eliza, or nobody ever calls her a real name. It's Liza.
Liza.
Yeah.
Yeah, you be Liza, and Lee, you be Lee, and then after you respond, we'll give you a grade, a letter grade. Was it an A, a B, a C?
Okay.
Below, we'll say, here's what you did that worked, and here's what didn't work. And then here's how you could improve it a little bit using this or that of the 5 secrets, or modifying the way you did this or that communication technique from the 5 secrets. So let's
Great.
Go for the gold.
Okay. So, Lee, I don't think you need to use that tone with a small child.
I think you're right there, Liza. I'm sorry about that. I just got frustrated with her in that moment. I shouldn't be using that tone with Zia. Zia, I'm sorry that I use that tone with you, love. Liza, I'm sorry to you as well. I imagine first, Zia, I imagine that frightened you a little bit, love. And Daddy apologizes for that. And Liza, I imagine that made you feel disconnected from me, because we've talked about how we want to parent our child, and worried, scared even, that I'm not going to follow through with what I promised that I would do and have said that I want to. And I just also want to acknowledge that it's really brave of you to raise that point with me, given our history and how I've reacted about that in the past. And I just wanted to express that I do want to change that, and I'm sorry that it came up. And how about we have a chat now, or maybe later, about how best that we could both approach this situation when Zia's being really challenging when it comes to feeding her or putting her pajamas on. How does that sound, or something like that?
Great. Now, that was a beautiful job. What grade would you give yourself? And all of you who are listening to this or watching, ask yourself, are you going to give Lee an A, a B, a C? Ask yourself, what did Lee just do that worked? Was there some part that perhaps might not work? And if so, how could it be improved? So, Lee, let me ask you first what letter grade you gave yourself.
I think I would give myself a B. I think what come up for me is obviously like the Tin Man on the Wizard of Oz with no oil, right? There's a risk that it doesn't come across as genuine because you're not practiced in it, and you don't want to be too over practiced because then it sounds disingenuous. I think if I was able to catch this in the heat of the moment, then I think my communication with Liza would have been a lot better, rather than trying to be scripted now. The one question that I had, though, was on assertiveness, using I feel statements, where, you said quite rightly that I realized in hindsight that Liza must have been feeling a lot of different emotions. And, that I was feeling a lot of negative emotions. But in the way that Liza actually raised the question at the time, she did it in a very respectful, nice, polite way. And it feels a bit strange for me then to say to her, you made me, no, that's wrong. When you said what you said, I felt this. Because really, I created all that. Like, there was nothing about her tone, or she was just worried about her child.
Right.
And
I'm so glad you raised that. That is actually what I think was missing from
right,
your
I think that's why I missed it. Yeah.
And so I love that you're saying that, but if I can paraphrase how I understood what you were saying is, you're struggling, Lee, like, what is this assertiveness business? I mean, I'm not supposed to tell her what to do, and I'm supposed to express my feelings openly and directly. I had such a strong emotional reaction. I don't want to, like, put that on her. But right. I would say Jill, actually think there is a space for you to be able to share that. And actually, I think this would have been like an A if you could have pulled. I mean, we can go over specific details, but I did think that was missing because it didn't feel to me like authentic Lee.
Right.
To me, what that would look like, and actually, if without redoing your whole thing, to me, what that would look like would just be like right in the moment, like, oh, like deep breath. It's hard for me to hear that. Like, I feel myself wanting to defend my honor. I can feel, I feel defensive. I feel guilty. I feel incompetent, whatever those feelings would be that you could really like share in that moment. And yet I know you're right, Liza.
Yeah, I could see.
I know that I could have said that in such a nicer tone. I think you're right. I got carried away and feeling frustrated with Zia, and you're totally spot on that I could have done that differently, and that it would be better if I could do that differently. And then go on to the rest of the beautiful stuff you did with her, with the feeling empathy and with the stroking and with the inquiry. Does that make sense to you, Lee, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can see how tremendously important it is at that time to also get across your own feelings as well as acknowledging the other person's feelings. It's just, I think though, because of the history, in the order in which you put these points is like super important, because you could be, I can imagine me screwing this up, trying in the best intentions, and it leading to a defensiveness because I've put some of the things in the wrong order. So I think,
well, to make a long story short, you will screw it up an awful lot, and so you might as well just give yourself the instruction to screw it up 10 or 15 times in a row. But just to focus on what Jill was saying there and what you were saying, you made a beautiful point that you sounded a bit like a Tin Man. I also gave you a B. I thought part of your response was just absolutely beautiful. But it was because it was lacking the I feel statements. It did sound kind of artificial,
right?
And that might be the one thing you'd want to be focusing on first in your own training. We can give you a little Zen exercise here in just a moment, and we'll Jill and I can start attacking you, and you'll be forced to respond with I feel statements over and over again to get really good at the thing that you're weak at. But it may have something to do with this idea. I'm supposed to be a man, and a man doesn't express his feelings. And although that's stereotyped, that phenomenon really does occur. But you're a wonderfully emotional person, and I thought the way you modeled sharing your feelings, Jill, was just jaw-dropping. It was so beautiful and so genuine. And you are very emotional person. You're a man with a lot of emotions, and God bless you for that. I admire that about you, Lee, and that's a tremendous source of strength that you have that you're not utilizing. And it can be done in therapy too. I in Philadelphia, I had a colleague at my clinic, Tony Bates from Ireland, really a wonderful, charismatic, neat psychologist. And once during a role play with a difficult patient, he used an I feel statement beautifully, and it was just, my jaw dropped open. I thought, wow, that is so beautiful. Therapists can actually, you can express your feelings in a very professional way and deepen your relationships, but it's certainly in a marriage is the same. It's the same thing. My other tiny correction was that at the end you got into problem solving.
Yep.
And and somebody once said the attempt to solve marital problems is the cause of all marital problems, and the refusal to solve them is always the solution. In fact, somebody might have even said that earlier on our podcast. I'm sure it went in one ear and out the other. You say these things, it takes a while for them to sink in, but you're trying to have a chat with her about how best to interact with your daughter, as if that's something we're going to do later on, whereas you can have the intimacy right now. And chats like that might have some value at some point, but there's a river of emotion going on underneath this argument that you're having. Her emotions and your emotions, and what the day calls for, what is needed, is the acknowledgement of her feelings and the acknowledgement of your sharing of your own feelings in a respectful way. That's where the intimacy occurs. That's where the magic happens.
You can help me with that then, I think, because that the reason I added that in was my attempt at stroking. So maybe you could give me a better way of stroking, maybe.
Yeah. So what? Let's just see what you did, Lee. So you said, "I think you're right there," which was disarming. And then I think you said like I got frustrated.
No, you said I'm sorry I got frustrated.
I'm sorry I got frustrated, and I shouldn't be using that tone with Zia. So what I thought you did well there is the disarming. You're right. And what I would recommend is that you also share your feelings there, right?
Right.
That you say, gosh, Liza, you're totally right. I don't need to use that tone with Zia. And, hearing you say that, I can't help but feel, kind of defensive and ashamed and badly about myself. And, at the same time, there's total truth to what you're saying. I absolutely agree with you. And I would also share, and I feel badly that I kind of screwed up in this way.
Right.
Because you and I have talked about this, and I know that this is important to you. And I feel badly because I really care about you and about being on the same page with you parenting. Like that would be my stroking. Just I really care about you, and I want to feel connected to you. I want us to be, kind of parenting Zia together on the same team. I think that's all you need.
That helps. Yeah.
And then you can say, I can imagine you're feeling, A, B, and C, and kind of scared and frustrated and hurt and
disappointed
and maybe even a bit angry with me, and for good reason. And then the inquiry needs to go at the end. Can you tell me more what that's been like for you? I really want to hear what you have to say. I've been arguing with you. I've been pushing you away.
That's your inquiry.
I'm ready to listen.
That was what I messed up when my inquiry was, right, how can we both fix this problem? Right.
Instead of, can you tell me more about, this is really important, and I know this has happened, more than once. What is this like for you?
Yeah.
So to make it simple, because it's so hard, there's 2 of the 5 secrets you're going to need to work on, and we can practice right now if you like. But what are they, Lee?
Stroking and inquiry.
I think you left out the first.
No.
You left out the thing we've been trying to teach you, and it's so interesting.
Yeah, I feel. Sorry.
Right.
I feel.
Yeah, I added a third one. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. So you're saying I feel stroking and inquiry is what you're feeling. You could work on. Yeah. So should we do some role playing now with that? You want to sure. I mean, the one option is that we could hit you with it one more time, and you could see if you could do the new and improved response. And,
let's do that.
Yeah. Should we do that first?
Yeah.
Okay. So Lee, I don't think you should use that tone with a small child.
You're right. I'm sorry about that, Liza. I know we've spoken about this before. It must make you feel very disheartened and very distrusting of me that I'm not going to get this right. I just want you to know that in that moment, when you tell me that truth, it does make me feel like I'm a failure, a little bit embarrassed and ashamed of my behavior. but I want you to know that everything you've said is true. I should not be raising my voice like that at our child, especially because we have had conversations in the past that we do not want to behave like that in front of Zia. So I'm sorry for that. And Zia, I'm really sorry for doing that to you as well, because I can see, I imagine that you was very afraid, that Daddy made you afraid then. I'm sorry about that. I imagine that it got myself a little bit lost then.
We've done some disarming. You've done a little bit of an I feel statement. You've done a halfway of acknowledging her feelings, a tad of feeling empathy.
Yeah. I imagine when I behave in this way, Liza, it makes you feel frustrated, like despairing almost, like you want to give up on me, but don't give up on me. I really want to work with you. I want to be your partner in this. I want us to be great parents. And I'm going to continue to try my best that when we have really difficult situations like that we're on the same page. And I'm really open now or anytime in the future to listen to you more about how I could have behaved differently in this situation to have a much better outcome aligned with how we want to raise Zia in the future.
What grade did you give yourself on that one?
Probably worse because I just slipped up in the middle of it. But I don't know, I felt a lot more comfortable, like more authentic, more off script, more kind of just going with the flow. I guess, like you said earlier on, I think it's really important not to be worrying about trying to get everything, because then that might lead me to more inauthenticity. So
yeah,
B again, I guess.
What grade did you give it, Jill?
Yeah, I think I would give it maybe a B plus, an A minus. I mean, I think you're almost there. I thought it might have even been a tiny bit heavy-handed on yourself. Like I did felt almost a little bit like you were making it seem like you had done something so awful. Right. Like I worried a little bit about you going too much in that direction. And maybe again, the inquiry I think could just be shorter and sweeter. Like you don't have to go into this whole, I'll keep trying my best. I keep failing. I don't know. I want to listen to you more. I just might have said, part of me worries that it then becomes too much like, oh, woe is me. I'm such a failure. I suck so bad, And
I'll do better.
Bit of the emphasis away from her. So like, if I take yours and just improve it, I love you started with, you're right. I did just raise my voice to Zia, and I know we've talked about that, and I really don't want to be doing that. You're totally right. And you said, and I'm guessing that you might be feeling kind of disheartened that I've done that again and frustrated with me. And then I like how you said when you tell me that, which is true, I feel a little bit embarrassed and ashamed. It's hard for me to hear, but everything that you said is absolutely true. I thought all of that was great. And then I think I would just say, and, I think it's hard, especially hard for me to hear because I really care about you. I really want to be on the same team with you. I want us to be doing a good job parenting together. And so, yeah, you're right. Can you tell me more about kind of what this is like for you? What's coming up for you? Almost like I want you to be truthful and authentic and connected in the moment, but I also don't want you to be throwing yourself under the bus so much that then she feels the need to like take care of you. I want you to just sort of be equals being intimate and open in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Definitely. Yeah.
Do you want some more input, or are you overwhelmed with input?
No, go for it, dude.
Okay. I also gave you B plus, A minus. And by the way, a B plus, A minus might be way more than most of us get in our lifetime.
Yeah, right.
It might be good enough to move things in a much better direction, but there's a lot of fine tuning that can make it a whole lot better. when you say I'm sorry and I'm going to do better, I would recommend you never say that again for the rest of your life, because it's just awful.
Right.
It's kind of like what men who beat their wives are always saying. I'm sorry, I'll do better, type of thing. And there's something very formulaic and
sounds
cheap.
Weak.
Yeah, sounds pathetic. And that's a fine tuning, but kind of an important point. You say it must make you feel. I just say you're right. I did screw up right now and raise my voice, and I can imagine you're feeling disheartened and distrustful. That's kind of how you started out, with small edits. And what's another feeling that she might have had that no one in the United States or England has ever acknowledged? What's one emotion that no American or British person has ever been able to acknowledge and will never be able to acknowledge? It's an emotion that begins with A, ends in R, and has an NGE in the middle. Anger. She might be feeling angry. And if somebody's feeling angry and you don't acknowledge it, the anger might escalate. And so you need to acknowledge the anger in a way that will make her proud of her anger, not feel the need to deny it. And so you could have added to that. It must, and I'll send you the feeling words chart after we're done here, so you can take a look at it, because it has all these feeling words that you can use when you're doing feeling empathy, as well as when you're sharing your own feelings. But you know what her feelings were, because you've got them written down here.
Yeah, I was going to say, Lee has a feeling words chart in his brain, clearly.
Yeah, and you do beautifully at that. You can just say, I can imagine right now you're feeling kind of anxious and disheartened and maybe distrustful, maybe a bit angry with me for good reason. And when you say maybe a little bit angry and for good reason, kind of gives her permission to be angry. And when we come to the end of your statement, then you can add her. Oh, you put the feeling words chart up here. That's cool. Yes, that's it. And we can publish this on the show notes as well. And then you said that when you did your own feelings in that moment, it makes me feel, what you said makes me feel like a failure or ashamed. That was beautiful, but again, this is fine tuning. When you say what you said makes me feel this way, it sounds like you're blaming her for the way you're feeling. And I would just change the wording of it a little bit. Just to say something like, to be honest with you, right now, I'm feeling a little bit of shame, like I kind of, screwed up, and I feel, a little kind of like incompetent, and kind of like I'm kind of defective or something like that, and feeling a little foolish. These are all words that you said that you were having these feelings, and I like to combine that with stroking. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I'm having these feelings is because I do love you so much, and I really want us to be partners and to come close, maybe. And then when you said at the end, I'm going to try my best again, I don't like that. I'd rather just go into intimacy rather than promising some changes in the future. Let's get intimacy right now at this moment. Right. Then when you said, we can talk about it now or sometime in the future, it sounds like, let's not do it now. Instead, I would rather say, tell me more what this has been like for you. It's painful for me to hear what you're saying, but I want to hear it. I love you, and you probably get so pissed off at me. And tell me what the relationship has been like, and some of the things that I do or say that kind of have hurt your feelings and turned you off.
Yeah, so Lee, we gave you a lot of feedback, and my own experience in working on my own communication is sometimes it's helpful for me to write it out. In other words, of course, I don't want to be delivering a script to someone, but it actually helps me sometimes to work it out. And for me, actually, even though there isn't exactly a formula, I do think roughly starting with disarmament, just in my head to kind of go, I always want to start by agreeing and finding truth, and then attending to the other person's feelings, right? I'm guessing your feeling, and then sort of share my feelings and link it with some stroking, and then just end by asking, can you tell me more about what this has been like for you or how you're feeling? So we're saying a lot, but I think if you process it and write it down, you can sort of come up with a way of really connecting without having to think too much about it.
We've gone off the boil a little bit lately, but we have started reading Feeling Good together.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were doing, we still do it now actually, is when we get into a conflict situation, one of or both of us will say, okay, we have to find a grain of truth in what the other person has just said right now. And although we don't do it as professionally as you've both been teaching me right now, it really does help kind of disarm things. When we're like, oh, okay, I've really got to think, okay, you're right in this, or something like that, But I think what David said earlier on then about the importance of not making Liza feel like I'm blaming her is absolutely vital. Like how many times that has kicked off into, wow, I've been on this training course and I'm trying to be open to you and you're now defending yourself, and it just escalates into
right. You have to be very careful not to say we're basically saying that if you said to her, oh, when you said that it made me feel defensive, you could just scrap the first part of the sentence and say, I notice that I'm feeling kind of defensive right now. And at the same time, et cetera, et cetera.
Especially, I guess as well, it really helps knowing your partner's style of communication. So like Liza is super, really focuses on the meaning of words and sentences and expression. And I'm kind of not. So like, I have to be really mindful of that, because my meaning, if it isn't portrayed in the right way, could lead into not being understood, So
you also need to remember, David, you said something earlier that's worth repeating. Lee, you need to remember that you probably will screw up,
Yeah.
I hope that what we've practiced, and that if you continue to practice it, that you will do a better job of connecting, but you'll probably screw up and you'll probably say something that will make her angry. And then what do you do if she says, you see, you don't get it, et cetera, et cetera? Then how will you reply to her getting angry with you?
If she turned around and said, you don't get it, then I would turn around and say something around the lines of, oh, I can sense that you're feeling slightly angry at my reaction there. Can you tell me more about how I did that? Like, what have I just done that's just made you angry? Because I love you, Liza, and I want to get on the same page here. Let's talk about what I've just done to create that reaction with you.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. One of your weaknesses is you don't use I feel statements. Did you just use an I feel statement?
It's not. Like if someone said to me, what's an I feel statement? I'd have to look at a piece of paper. Like,
well, it's just, I'm feeling. Did you tell her in that beautiful response? What you did was beautiful.
Yeah. And I was just trying to get you to see, essentially, you would just try to use the 5 secrets again, right? You'd say, man,
right.
Yeah, I did it again. Oops, and
right. But add an I feel statement.
Right.
How would you be feeling if your wife says that to you? What are the names of your emotions?
Right, say it again, Jill.
Yeah, Lee, you still just don't get it.
That.
No, don't say that makes me.
No.
Like,
just put it like this.
I told you that you don't need to use that tone of voice with our child, and you're still defending yourself. Like, what? You don't get it.
I'll start with an I feel statement. I'm feeling really inadequate, and I'm feeling really inadequate and fairly stupid right now because I don't seem to be able to get this down, and I really, really want to nail this because I love you so much, and
It's really important to me that we're on the same page here in terms of parenting Zia. Something like that.
So far, that's an A+. And can we say, and can I imagine that you, Lisa, are feeling?
And I imagine when I slip into this mode that it makes you feel almost exacerbated with me and angry. And I imagine there are times when you just want to give up and you're just like, this guy's never going to get it, you know?
Now finish with inquiry.
Is there...
formula here is, can you tell me more?
Can you tell me more about how it makes you feel when I behave in this way, and also when I've behaved in this way in the past? You know, how often do I do it? Like, I'm open to listening. I'm open to hearing you talk to me about these issues right now.
What grade do you give yourself on that piece? That whole piece that you just did?
Again, I'd give myself a B+ just because it was broken up a little bit, but I can see myself getting better and better at it.
What grade did you give it, Jill?
Yeah, it's hard for me because there were different pieces we were trying to weave together. But I think in the end, if you said each of those pieces, I would...
In one go, yeah.
Yeah, A- or something, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was in the A- realm. There was a lot of gentleness in it. And when you started out with the I feel statement, then you showed yourself as a human rather than as a man who doesn't feel. And it was very compelling. And everything you said after that, I was drawn in because you were kind of speaking from the heart. And then the odd thing is when you use I feel statements and make yourself vulnerable. But the weird thing is you simultaneously become invulnerable because when you're using I feel statements, there's no way you can be put down. It's the weakest thing in the world, and it's the most powerful thing as well, because I'm just drawn so close to you when you do that. Now, I have a quick question for you, Jill, and I'll give a quick a quick commercial for my book since you mentioned it. If you're listening and you're a therapist and you have patients with relationship problems, or if you just want to work on your own, you mentioned the book Feeling Good Together, which anyone can get it on Amazon.com. It's a small paperback, and it'll really show you how to do these things through written exercises and verbal exercises like what we're doing on the show today. But I want to ask you, Jill, that since Lee will continue to struggle, we're all will continue to struggle, but you're on a very fast learning thing right now. What should he do? What should Lee do for homework to take what we've started here today and to get good at it? What practice?
Yeah. I there are a couple things that come to mind. One is, Lee, again, I see you as a intense learner and student and that kind of thing. And I'm the same way. I think it would be helpful to have a couple extra copies of the relationship journal, and maybe even to walk through the same exercise with a couple of other examples with your wife. What are other, I would think if I were you, I really want to nail these tools, and what are other things she could say that push my buttons, and to kind of walk through either all of the steps, or if you feel like you really got it in your head, like, man, I'm to blame, I got to work on my communication, then just be practicing writing out or verbally practicing 5 secrets responses to the hardest things that she says to you, the things that really kind of get you riled up and make you want to defend yourself. So that's what I would practice.
Right.
That. So that means practicing the 5 secrets out of the moment, because you don't have to manage your own emotions and manage your response. And then the next thing, of course, would be in the moment to start to bring these tools to actually, when your wife, criticizes you or does something that feels controlling, really trying to bring your 5 secrets game to the moment.
Yeah, a lot of practice will be required, and if we were an ongoing therapy, every time you came in for sessions, I would be practicing. I'll be Lisa, you be yourself, and just do it over and over again until you can get A's consistently.
Right.
Then try it with your wife. You could also be listening to recordings of the sessions, and you'll have access to this recording. And I would, listen to that, especially the latter portion. It may all be fascinating to you, but this portion where we're doing the role play and practicing, I think would be very crucial. Now, I'm also wondering, could Lee do this intimacy exercise that we just demonstrated, where one is Lisa and one is Lee, and then you get a grade? I mean, could he do that exercise with his wife?
Right. Well, yeah. There's the 1 minute drill or the 60-second drill, David, that's in your book.
Well, that's true too. Yeah.
But certainly, again, the way I would approach it would be to say to your wife, hey, I really want to practice my skills in responding to you, and would you be willing to lend yourself to me, and we can do some practice. I'll probably screw up, but my goal would be to be able to respond well, etc. And the reason I say that is I'm not going to put pressure on her to do anything differently in that moment, but I'm just going to work on myself. So you could certainly set aside time, each day or whatever, where she would just kind of say something critical, and you would be practicing responding.
Also,
she's open to that.
And getting feedback from her on how did that feel? How did that sit? How's that going?
Yeah. Also, I had mentioned that you can do a Zen exercise. If there's one thing you're weak at, you can practice just that thing.
Right.
And if we can just do it right now for a minute or so, we have to close off here in just a couple of minutes.
Yep.
But how about if Jill and I will take turns criticizing you?
Okay.
And we won't necessarily even be Liza. We'll just be mean people. Okay. And you have to respond to each statement with everything we say. You have to use I feel statements. Now, if you want to add something else, you can, but the first thing comes out of your mouth has to be an I feel statement, and that's all you're obligated to do.
Okay. Yeah.
So you can get good at the one thing that you tend not to do.
Right. So we're not saying this would be it in real life, but it's just a drill.
It's just a drill using one of the 5 secrets.
Okay.
You want to start out, Jill? I tend to be too aggressive.
Oh, goodness.
I'll give you one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I got it. Lee, you've been working too much. You're not spending enough time with us.
I feel like I'm not spending enough time with you. I feel
it's not an I feeling statement. That's a statement of behavior. That's a repeating.
I feel followed by a feeling word.
Okay. I feel absent. I feel disconnected. I feel sad that you feel that way.
When you said I feel sad, you got a home run on that one.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
That was really, really beautiful, and that would have been enough. Just that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm feeling really sad right now.
I'm struggling with how to start off. So when you say to me, I don't know, Leah, you're not showing it. You're working too hard, and you're not at home enough.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily start with the I feel. I agree with you, Lee. You said before you feel like you need to start with her and then move to you, which I actually 100% agree with. I think you need to start with disarming.
Okay.
Almost always, you're absolutely right. I have been working a ton, and I haven't been home. And I'm guessing that you're feeling frustrated and annoyed, but also maybe lonely and, unimportant. And I feel, and then you would share your feelings. And
I'm feeling sad.
I'm feeling sad and disappointed and even a little bit guilty that I haven't been here.
But for this exercise, just do I feel.
Ignore the disarming.
This is artificial. Are you willing to be artificial?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to do it to you now. Ready? Okay.
Yeah.
Lee, I can tell from this last session that we've been doing that you really don't have it in you. You're just kind of a phony, and you don't want to change.
I feel sad. I feel worthless. I feel inadequate.
What grade do you give that, Jill?
That was great.
I thought it was super.
Spot on.
Super and very powerful. You could argue with me or put me down, and then it would escalate. But what you said just blows everything else out of the water. You be Lisa again, Jill.
Oh, Lee, I don't know what you were thinking, taking your son on vacation and not including me and our daughter.
Or that was your ex-wife that said that?
No, my current wife.
Okay.
Current wife.
This is harder than I thought.
Notice your arms are crossed defiantly.
Say that again, Jill, please.
And all I want you to do is think about how you're feeling when I say that to you. So Lee, I don't know what you were thinking, taking your son on vacation and leaving me and our daughter.
I am no good at thinking of these things without looking at them on paper.
Well, we can put the feeling words piece up there.
No, because then that would be artificial then, wouldn't it? You know, like this is how...
Wait. So don't say it to her, but just say it to me. How do you feel when she said that to you? How do you feel, Lee, when those words are said to you? You don't have to be, protect
I feel angry. I feel defensive. I feel misunderstood.
I feel hurt.
Yeah.
Feel hurt, yeah.
Do I feel sad?
I think my mistake there is I was trying to think of feeling words, positive feeling words, not negative.
I think it's okay to share those. I even think it's okay to feel defensive and hurt and misunderstood.
Here's another exercise for you, Lee. When I created the 5 secrets, the hardest one for me was the disarming technique. I couldn't see the truth in criticisms people gave me. And so I worked on it for 2 months exclusively. On the train home from work, on the way to Bryn Mawr, from the 30th Street train station in Philadelphia, I would write down things that patients might say to me or family members, and then try to write out a disarming response. How would I agree with that? And I did it, 20 minutes a day for 2 months. And by the end of that 2 months, I got to where I could agree with anything. I got really, really good at it. And the I feel thing is difficult for you. So if you're going to be spending 10 minutes a day, you might want to do that 5 days in a row. Just keep writing down I feel statements. If Liza says this, how could I use an I feel statement? If my ex-wife says this, how could I use an I feel statement? And then if you want to work more on feeling empathy, then you could do that for another 5 days in a row. But get really good at the things that are challenging for you, because you have gentleness, you've got warmth, you're a loving person, you've got the motivation. You've done a fabulous job here today, and we're really just talking about a little bit of fine tuning. Because you've got 80% of it already.
And know that you can share the negative and the positive. You can share that I feel criticized, I feel incompetent, I feel inadequate, and I also feel sad because I know that I've hurt you. You can bring we're not saying you're not allowed to share some of those defensive feelings, because I think it's far better to share them than to act them out, right?
Right.
So I just think there's a de-escalation in you. You will feel a de-escalation in the intensity of your feelings as soon as you share them, And I think it also, as David says, the person cares about you, they attend to you when you share those feelings.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you become more lovable, more attractive, more endearing.
Yeah.
When you share your feelings and make yourself vulnerable. But it won't just be a matter of practice for you, because you're supposed to be a man. You're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to stick up for the truth. So there will be a little resistance around this very powerful technique. Well, why don't we get a little feedback from Lee to see what you've liked and disliked about today's session? We need to wrap up here. But then once we're done, I sent you the brief mood survey, and you could do the end of session ratings, and then you can maybe scan them to Jill and David.
Okay. Before I came on here, Liza said, "What's this all about?" And I said, "I'm going to go on a podcast. I'm going to tell everyone how bad you are, and then Jill and David are going to get me to see that I'm created it all. And then everything's going to be all right. And she laughed. To come on here and to viscerally experience at an emotional level the enlightened moment when you realize that you are actually creating all the anarchy that you're complaining that somebody else is introduced into your relationship, it's very, very humbling and very, very powerful. And it just goes to show the difference between doing the work and reading about the work or thinking about the work. So the most powerful takeaway for me today, because we have a good check-in system in place as well, where at the end of the day, we both check in, where we hold space for each other to share how you're feeling emotionally. And what is great here is I can go back with Liza now and talk about what we went through and show her the EAR, and then both of us talk as we do about how we can bring EAR into our relationship and both hold each other as well as ourselves accountable. And frameworks like that really, really help me in particular. And I think that's the main thing I got out of it was when I looked at that EAR, I was like, oh, I can quite clearly see where I screwed up here.
What are your closing words, Jill?
No, it was really such a pleasure to work with Lee. I agree with what David said earlier. Your resistance was really your gift to us. You were so real and vulnerable and open. It felt like kind of a gift to be able to be here with you and to empathize with you, and also to kind of go to recognize your resistance, just to see you being so honest about how incredibly hard it is to give up the habit of being right. That was so powerful for me to see. But then also your humility and your ability to really, say, no, I got to give this up. I got to give this habit up. I got to try to work on myself and do it for myself, for my wife, for my daughter, for my son. It was really beautiful.
Thank you.
I have great high hopes for you in using these tools and struggling and succeeding and then failing and then trying again, but in really putting it to work.
It's been terrific. Thank you so much, Lee. I've been a fan of yours for some time. And when are you, and I'm 10 times the fan now after today's, what you've given to all of us today. When are you coming to the U.S.?
We are planning to fly out in November, and then we will be staying there for 6 months.
Where?
We'll be in Tahunga and Valencia.
So you'll be in California.
Yeah. That's so. I mean, California's a big place, right? I mean, it's big. Well, it's bigger than Wales, where I am at the moment. So, but yeah, I would love to be able to make my way over there for the hikes and choose.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, it'd be great to see you here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just want to say this. Like the Feeling Good Institute and your book, David, and your work, Jill, and Stephen Fleider and Matthew May. Huge influence on what we're doing at the Truth About Alcohol and Strive. As Jill knows, all right, we haven't all been the most attentive because we're all living around the world. But, Jill is training the next group of moderators who are going to be helping more and more people become people who don't drink alcohol, and they're going to be using these same tools. So
yeah, Lee and his some therapists that are working with him have been attending my most recent 6-week CBT methods online class. So it's been fun getting to teach and train them.
One last commercial message. If you're looking for training, you're looking at one of the greatest trainers in the world, Jill Levitt, and you do a lot of online courses and consultation. And so don't hesitate to contact.
Yeah, so people can find information about that at feelinggoodinstitute.com/training.
So thank you, everybody, and have a great day. I really appreciated the gift you gave us to show people how our interpersonal model works, and also to get to know you.
Yeah,
thank you, David. Thank you, Jill.
Okay.
All right, and this is a wrap. Thank you so much, Jill and David. This was a true tour de force. And I'm sure that people will really benefit greatly from this. I'm very happy that we finally got the interpersonal model in a live session. That was really hard to make it happen. And I'm also very grateful for Lee. I sort of wish we had him online today to talk about it, but he was so willing to be open and self-disclose and really do this work that it made a big difference. And so before we close, Jill, you had received a letter from him after the session. If you would like to share that with us and our listeners.
Yes. Actually, so Lee sent an email to David and I as sort of an update, and I'll read his email. And I just wanted to say, I think it's really helpful for people to understand that when we oftentimes, David will talk about, the one session cure, and we'll say that we can bring about really rapid change, which is totally true. But we also always have the understanding that the patient will need to keep working using these tools. So if it's depression and someone feels so much better at the end of the session, they're going to relapse. There's going to be a moment in time where those negative thoughts are going to come back, and they're going to have to use the same tools to bring them back to enlightenment, as we say. And the same with the relationship. Of course, Lee had been practicing debating and being right for his entire life. And now we've offered him another way of doing things, and he's going to obviously need to keep practicing and keep working. So his email said to us, I've been communicating with Liza as coached, but something happened that I wasn't expecting. Liza began giving me little passive-aggressive digs. I didn't handle them very well and found myself back in a conflict situation with her, laying the blame squarely back to me. I told her that the session didn't work because it needed her to also understand her part in this problem, and that I wouldn't accept these little digs. When all of a sudden it hit me. She was throwing punches because she was unhappy. Once I realized this, I began expressing empathy instead of angst. I dropped the need to be a man, as society defines it, and became the man I wanted to be. Once I flipped and was able to rise above my ego, her demeanor changed, and she fell in love with me again. I wanted to share that with you. I was close to emailing you to tell you that I had failed before this happened. Thanks for everything, Lee.
Wow. Well, this is a testament to the power of using this in a way that is, really kind and vulnerable.
Absolutely. I felt so proud of Lee for, as he said, putting his ego aside and really being willing to listen and try to understand, and to see that she was lashing out because she was feeling, again, hurt, disappointed, angry, and to be able to not argue, but really listen and share feelings.
I want to thank Lee, too, for giving us this fantastic opportunity, for being so real, for being so vulnerable, and allowing a dialogue to take place that can hopefully touch many, many thousands of people. I think we all suffer from similar struggles in our lives and our attempts to get close to other people. And gosh, Lee, you gave us all, the greatest gift that you can give.
And I want to thank the two of you for leading that session. I can't think of anybody better to do this and able to pull it off. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this podcast under the blog page, and where you can leave your comments and questions. The website has an abundance of resources for therapists as well as non-therapists, including books, workshops, a list of online training groups around the world, and much more. Theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Fabrice Nye, and I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.